My name is Dr. Alexandra Dent, and I'm a clinical psychologist, and I also work as a spiritual psychologist. My sole mission in this lifetime for me is to bring together a scientific or clinical way of looking at psychological distress and being able to combine it with a more spiritual approach as well. And in my clinical work, I adopt a BioPsychoSocialSpiritual approach to treating and working with people. If we're going to work in a spiritual way, it's really important that we as clinicians and therapists look at ourselves and do the inner work. Because as we do the inner work, we will then shift and change in our energy and our vibration. And then that has a knock-on effect on the work we're doing with others. This is an essential part of the process. There's no quick fixes to this. We really have to go within and look at all our inner traumas, our own personal issues, our own personal judgments, and look at healing those. And as we heal them, we really do shift in ourselves, our ability to have unconditional love, compassion, and kindness for others. And that really does have such a big benefit for the people we work with. As we work on our own inner selves, this might be something that you also start sharing with your clients. Now, for some clients, they might not be open or interested in this approach, and that's absolutely fine. You work with what's right for the client. But I'm also noticing that the more inner work that I do on myself, the more clients are coming to see me who are really keen to work in or adopt a more spiritual way of looking at things. I'm always amazed by, if I'm just asking a question about what their spiritual understanding is or ideas are, they respond with enthusiasm, go, oh, I'm really spiritual. I love that way of working. You know, it might be through yoga, through meditation, it might be through artwork, it might be through music that they have a spiritual connection. It might be with a higher source, a divine source, for example, or it might be through a more religious approach. There are no rights and wrongs. You work with what is right for the client. That's really important. It's not about imposing your views on your client. It's about working with what feels right for them. And the more inner work you do on yourself, the greater is your ability to work with clients in a very open, nurturing, and compassionate way. There are many ways that we can do our inner work. For some people, it might be through meditation. It might be different healing approaches. Again, you have to find out what's right for you. Some people believe that we have a soul, and they might choose to do some soul level healing. And there are many different forms of soul level healing that you can do as well. This video that I'm showing you today is a discussion with a very dear colleague of mine, Liz King, who is a soul healing practitioner. She's very experienced in working in many different formats for doing soul level work. And we're going to have a discussion about some of the types of soul level healing that she offers. So again, this is something that you feel drawn to do for your own inner work, or it might be something that you would like to do to further your own clinical experience and learn how to do some of these approaches. But again, I'm really emphasizing that whatever you use with your clients, you do so very ethically, very making sure it's very protected, and making sure you've got the insurance to cover this kind of work. I personally have done an awful lot of soul level work throughout the last few years, and I've done this through a range of Akashic record work, soul retrieval work, past life regression, and many other different forms of healing. This has helped me to really understand myself, but also what I've come to realize as well is that it's not about attaching to the stories that you learn about your soul's journey. It's important that we understand, but we move forwards, because we are living in this lifetime. We're not our past lives. So we use that information to really just heal, move forwards, and embrace the life that we are living now. Use that knowledge for our advantage, so that we don't repeat the same patterns, the same cycles of behavior, that we can learn from those experiences. So I'd like to introduce Liz King, who is a very dear colleague and friend of mine, and very experienced as in many, many different areas of healing. So I hope I get this right, Liz, but you are a natural born clairvoyant, and you've been working in this way for probably 35 years or so. In addition to that, you do a lot of soul level work, which is incredible. And you have a lot of different areas and different techniques that you can do to help people to do soul level healing. And some of them include soul retrieval work, shamanic work, the Akashic records, past life regression work. And I think those are the 4 areas that would be really good to just have an overview on today. But I know in addition to that, you have done Reiki work, you're a high priestess, hypnotherapist, work with crystals, you work with aromatherapy, massage, so many different things. It's amazing. And I know I've had many sessions with you over the years, and also known you as a friend as well, that the level of information you get through when you are doing your work is just fascinating. It's a great experience. So welcome.
Well, it's lovely to be here, and of course to connect, because I mean, you know, we've known one another for so many years, and when you start to kind of put in your view of kind of the things, I do go, oh yeah, that is kind of part of what I do, but I kind of look at it as just a way of life, if that makes sense. It's not external to me, it's just part of who I am, and of course it's always fascinating to be constantly kind of, I don't feel that I learn. This is the way that I kind of look at it. I think I remember, and I know we'll talk about that in the point, isn't it? But it's just when something really goes, okay. And I know we've had fascinating conversations that I think everything, you know, it is just all aspects of the whole, if you like, methods, tools that we use. But, you know, it's just interesting to be able to kind of almost at this point in time, I suppose, with how the world is becoming, I think we are becoming more aware that the wonderful Indigenous people kind of are more advanced than we are, you know, because they're so in tune at that kind of soul and planetary level.
I think you're really right there. I was having this conversation with another colleague where Dr. Eileen Siegel, who does EMDR work, but does shamanic work as well. And part of the conversation we were having is that actually that knowledge is all within us at a soul level. And in this lifetime, we are reconnecting to that knowledge, and we might be really drawn to a certain area. We don't necessarily need to do so many courses now, because when we tap into that knowledge, it's there, we're unleashing it. So if you feel a really pull towards something, it's probably because your soul already has that knowledge that it's wanting to demonstrate and bring forth in this lifetime.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, I know that you were a big part of when I started to go through, you mentioned my high priestess training, and there was always that kind of concept. I mean, that whole idea for me kind of came about a number of years ago, but literally when I was sitting on my couch. Okay, it wasn't something that I'd looked into. It was something that literally came to me. And I did actually, I mean, I sat there in an empty room laughing out loud, you know, because this very strong kind of inner message had came to me, I believe from my guides, but in that sense of it, but, you know, that was there. And this is what I would be doing, you know, and I was just like, I know nothing about this. And yet that training was actually probably the biggest healing part for myself, because I recognized that what we were doing was kind of like getting rid of the baggage, as I like to call it. It wasn't easy work. But the whole focus on the course, when we got to the end of our training, but you never stop training, but that end of that particular training was actually the realization for a bunch of us that were working together to discover that actually what we were doing was just remembering who we were. So, of course, you know, when we, you know, really connect with those, what I'm going to say, those aspects of ourselves, because I think it's a remembering, you know, we remember these parts. Spiritual work for me, or any development work, is about the proof, and we'll always get the proof that we're on the right path. So when it will manifest, so for example, I had this real, going through, you know, life, I had this kind of almost aversion to traveling to certain countries, you know, and I'm thinking, why do I have these issues? And then when I completed the work, suddenly I was very drawn to travel to those countries. And when I went there, it was like I belonged. You know, this is it. It was like remembering. So I think that all the work that we do, or anybody does at a soul level, it has to, in some way, manifest on the physical plane, but also in our consciousness. We've got to be aware of it. And always, you know, I know when we spoke that any work that we do at the soul level, that we should see a change in the person that we're working with. But as that individual, they should be able to acknowledge that their life has changed, that patterns have been broken, you know, that life has moved on, it's got better. If it gets worse, then we have to obviously look at that, we're tapping into. So it takes away the kind of almost mystery, if you like, and the doubt. You know, when we ask somebody to believe in something that is unseen, but of course, with any practice, any therapy practices, you know, we go down the lines, don't we, that you can see the results. You know, you can see the results. With spiritual work, isn't it? You know, it's like, well, how do I know? It's like a leap of faith. But we should, you know, leaps of faith are fine. But, you know, at the point of it, what keeps us going is there should always be what I call the body of proof. We've got to be able to see that what we're doing works. If not, it just doesn't kind of hold energy for me.
There are two things there that you said. One is, I think you will be drawn to do the work when it's ready, when it's time to do that, or you'll be drawn to connect with a certain aspect of spiritual work at the time. So you can't force it, it will happen, divine timings. But also there's for me, it's the being able to do the inner work. You have to do the inner work if you're on this journey. And I think you are very similar to me, as we do a lot of our own inner work. And as we do that inner work, and as things shift, they also shift in how we're working clinically and for our clients as well. We're bringing them more energy, more vibration. And that's also really lovely. And we can see the I don't want to say the rewards, but we can see the outcome. Like you were saying, your clients want to see the proof of that. I think as we do our inner work, we should see our clinical work shift. And that's proof as well that keeps us going on this journey, because it's a tough journey. You know, we both know it can be really brutal and tough at times. And that gives you the hope, it gives you the inspiration to keep going with the work, because you're seeing the outcomes, the progress being made, not only within but also externally.
Absolutely. And this sense of it, I mean, I know we're not talking about it today, but I believe that we've all got guides, spiritual guides in the sense, even if it's a little voice in our head, if you like. But, you know, the thing is, nobody's in charge of us. So the timing is very much, I believe, what we've determined, if you like, the A to B to C to D, you know, in that sense of it. But it also has to do with our internal world. So you're very right that we have to do our own internal work to balance with the external, you know, because it's two very different landscapes. But, you know, by releasing what is going on. So it is about vibration, and that's where in a soul work, and the shamans understand that there's a vibration there. So what we will call the inner work, so, you know, pain, grief, anger, they're all what we call lower vibrational energies. It's the best way, because they can almost take a life to themselves in the kind of spiritual sense of it. But we can't have a very high vibrational physical life, if you like, or outer life, or we'll say an outer life, if the inner is lower vibration. So we were talking about that I started off doing psychic work, 35 years ago. I don't know, how did that happen? But that was it. That was a natural thing for me. I just suddenly woke, and it was there. It was always there as a child, but it was that awakening to me. And that is the thing that most people it's either a very frightening experience or it's a very wonderful experience. Now, our logical minds kind of go, oh, no, okay, this isn't right, keep safe. And then we start to almost want to talk about it. You know, if we find it exciting, we want to talk about it, we want to connect with people. What is this? But if we are not born into an environment, or we don't live in an environment where we're very open about the possibilities, it can then, there's judgment there. And yes, my lovely parents thought that I'd been dropped out of the sky into the cabbage patch, you know, because there was nobody around me. But yeah, I suddenly started to connect, and it's part of who I was. So from my psychic work, if you like, my clairvoyance, I then started to progress to somebody introduced me to the wonders of crystals, and I was like blown away by this. Oh my goodness, healing and crystals, oils for the aromatherapy. And I've kind of moved on in that sense of it, not because it isn't part of who I am. I use different methods because for me, they were tools. But that lifted my level of understanding, because of course our lovely indigenous people understand that you know, the power of crystals, you know, and the power of essential oils, but nature itself, that we're all part of one with it. So I kind of then, it was like the next level that we kind of went to. But it's about acceptability, isn't it? It's about the shift in the vibration. So the journey doesn't have to be from nothing to suddenly, wow, we've got to be understanding the cosmos. But it's also about being able to work in a way that is acceptable for people, and using the terminology that is acceptable to people. Because we do have that judgment. I mean, for a long period of time, if I was doing a talk about something, I think people thought I was going to turn up with long flowing robes and coins around my head, which is lovely. It's not who I am. I mean, I'm very kind of mean, because they're like, well, they're going to think that I've kind of, you know, I'm a bit left of centre. But if people want to dress like that, it's absolutely fine. But we have this camp, don't we, that we have to fit into a box, and that we can't be in a mainstream or very, you know, significant job, that, you know, that there are expectations of how we behave because we're spiritual. It's a huge block for many people that, what will people, think that I have, went left of centre. Well, what is this wonderful thing? And I learned actually from my family, who did think that I'd been dropped out of the sky into the cabbage patch. They changed because I stuck to my views, because my beliefs were so strong. I didn't try and convert them. I simply lived my life with a knowing, because once you know something, I don't believe you can forget it. You may put it into a box, but you can't forget it, because we are waking up. So anybody that is starting in this path or this journey, it will be scary, because we don't want anybody to judge us and think that, okay, then that this is a bit weird. It's not. I think that the ancients understood this. I think the way modern ways is a bit weird, but everybody is in their own path, isn't it? So it is scary, but it is also, it's only about just saying, okay, there's a possibility out there. And I kind of work, as you know, I can fit into anybody's, I suppose, understanding that if they need me to work in a sensible way, because we can talk about soul retrieval, we can talk about some of the shamanic side of things that can be way out there, but wonderful, wonderful experiences. Or, we can work in a very mainstream way, but the importance is our understanding that there is something bigger out there. It's just being able to let the people that we work with kind of know and accept the language, or work with the language that they find acceptable.
Fabulous. So could you, leading on nicely, could we have an overview of shamanic work? So when you work in that way, what does that involve?
So this is where it gets a little bit, okay. Lots of things on the internet about shamans. I do shamanic practices. I would never claim to be a shaman, because shamans are very much very traditional. So if you look at shamanism, you would be looking at Mongolia, you would be looking at the indigenous tribes there who really live and breathe that sense of it. So westernized, if you like, if I can put it that, on modern day westernized shamanism, we're talking about shamanic practices. Yeah. Because we do live in kind of urban society. But so the basis of shamanic work is that we understand that we are souls or spirit or energy in a body. We're not a body with a spirit. It's a huge difference. So shamans work, or shamanic practice, I work at a soul level. So I don't work with the body. I don't really work with the ego. We really connect at that deeper level. So understanding that shamanic work works with the spirit or the soul of the person. We also can work beyond the physical realm, because in shamanic practice, you will enter the spirit world. It's not just communicating as a clairvoyant. I communicate with spiritual beings, but in shamanic practice, I journey in the sense of it. So it's altered states of reality. Now, a true shamanic practice will allow, and this is the kind of scary bit, but a true shaman would allow spirit to possess their body and communicate in that way. Now, that's lovely. So that's why I'm a shamanic practitioner, because that's not what I do, and it's not necessary to do it. But the bulk of the information to heal is that we're healing every illness, whether it is physical, mental, or emotional illness, is actually illness of the spirit or illness of the soul. And when we understand that, that's where the healing can take place. So, you know, in certain parts, and I know that we've kind of spoken about this, that there's a kind of very much, you can draw a huge comparison because it's about the language, isn't it? So a shaman would talk to the soul. The shaman would work with the energy of the soul and work with the wounds, but it's understanding the journey or understanding the trauma there as well. So the work is not done in the consciousness where we really are working at that deep altered state of reality. And yes, in some of it we may go into almost an altered meditative state, if you like, to journey for answers. But nothing can be healed in a shaman's world until the soul of the spirit understands what has caused the illness. And it can be environmental, it can be ancestral, because a big part of the work is that we understand that we carry, that there is part of our ancestors in us. We are, you know, you go up with the lines. So we can have incidents, of course, that perhaps one of our ancestors has become ill in a particular way. So we understand it in the physical, don't we? That heart disease, for example, can be hereditary. Shamanic work, it goes way beyond that, and understanding that mental, emotional and physical trauma can also come not from only our past but our ancestral beings. But this is where we ask for allies. So it sounds very complicated in true shamanic sense, but once you kind of, you know, so that's the understanding, that's part of what I bring in, because sometimes we have people that come to us that are not in a well enough state to be able to work with. And that's the biggest sense of it, that, you know, when we look at mental illness, for me, it's very wrong for me to try and work with somebody as a spiritual practitioner, as a shamanic practitioner in what I'll call talking therapy, because it would be, you can start to add very much you know, it can be very challenging for people. If people believe in the spiritual and the holistic side of things, that's one thing, but, you know, we have to have this kind of sense of rationale and not make things worse. So I know that we've had, you know, conversations, but with the shaman, you see, they understand that. So the shamanic work, there is a different way to work with a soul that will understand, that is perhaps well enough to be able to heal. So we almost bypass that side of things with permission, because any soul-to-soul work in shamanism, any modality, has got to be that we get permission from that. And if not, if we don't, there's a protocol that we use. If we don't get permission, it doesn't happen. You know, it's that sense of it, because I believe, and the understanding is very much that the soul is an individual, and as, you know, as sentient beings, nobody tells us what to do at a soul level or not. It's all part of the procedure. It's all part of our path, part of our journey. But the interesting thing is that in Indigenous tribes, that shamans don't go to college. You know, they are either born into it. They will come from a long line of shamanic or shamans, or they suffer from serious mental illness that then from that then brings them that understanding of that spirit world. It's the two doors with which we enter into that part. And yes, I mean, I spoke about certain countries that I'd kind of healed. The bigger part of it was an Eastern European country that I argued with my mentor for hours that I'd never visited. And actually that would have been very much where I would have been in one lifetime more than likely a shaman. And shamans are not, gender exclusive. It's very much that we have male shamans and we have female shamans, and you look at it. But I think this is the aspects that are kind of coming through here. In the sense, but I think it's, if we're guided to any sort of healing work, this is where I think the root is, that there's a shaman in us all.
Yeah, I agree completely. And can you just explain a little bit more about, you're talking about journeying, for those people that don't understand what that means. When you say you do some shamanic journeying with one of your clients, what actually does that involve?
Sorry, and I should have said that as well, because of course, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because this is my language, isn't it? It's just
Yeah, no, it's
isn't it? It's like this is part of me.
It's your world.
Very much, it's my world. That's it. But that's the whole thing. So journeying is very much, it's almost like a meditative state. So we relax, but we go with intention. So journeying in a shamanic world, there's three worlds in the shamanic world. There's the upper, there's the middle world that we live in, and then there's the lower world. And people get a bit confused. Oh, the lower world, oh, that must be, is that dark? Is it scary? No, the lower world is very much about the past. It is about our ancestors. It's where we go for answers. The upper world are the teachers and kind of the future, if you like. So a shamanic journey is a guided or a visual journey where we go with purpose, that we travel into the world, the landscape of the person that we're working with. Now, if I'm doing a personal journey, I will go into my inner landscape, and our minds, if you like, will create what is very comfortable for us, where we feel safe. But it is normally about going down. So when we journey, anybody that's had hypnosis will understand, you go into that kind of almost down, we relax, we go down, we bypass the subconscious, and we then go through either a series of doorways, or so the journey will be very visual, but we're journeying in the sense of with a purpose. So if I'm journeying on behalf of a client, the client will not be there with me. Okay, that's the difference. I'm doing this work on behalf of the person, which again is very much a leap of faith, because of course, it's like, oh, somebody's working with me, but I'm not connected. So I would go into their inner landscape and I would find them in that landscape within my journey, because what I'm doing is I'm looking for an answer for that person. So something has manifested, whether it's physical illness, mental illness, emotional illness, there's stuck patterns. What we're looking for is answers. So it's lovely. It's like going on a bit of a trip to a different reality. Mine's always very nature-based, and that the lower world would be that. We go, now this could take a day, it could be 2 days. I mean, a shaman will just go. The inner journey takes as long as it takes, but we will overcome, what is going on within that person. So and the proof is always when we come back with the answer. And it could be a childhood thing, it could be something of the past. A shaman will work very blindly, actually, that, we don't always ask, kind of what's going on. And I know when we've done kind of, explored this kind of work, isn't it, it's better not to, go, right, okay, so what's kind of going on, and work back the way. No, what we're doing is we're just going in to see what is going on. So very visual, very informative, but you just have this sense of when you find the answer to what we're looking for. So, it may be times nothing in the lower world. You could be going back many lifetimes for that person, but the soul is, eternal. So we're tapping into that. We bring the answer back. And then it's when we have, because as I say, there's always this body of proof that when we have our session then with the client that we're working with, and say, right, okay, I've journeyed and this is what I've come upon and this is what I've seen. there will always be something that they resonate. Wait a minute, that's going on in this lifetime. That's your proof, because within that, it just becomes, faith. As human beings, in whichever way that we work, we have to know that it is working. Because if not, we doubt ourselves. Because remember, our egos come into it. So the journey that I talk about, now normally we would begin with perhaps using drums, or there can be instruments to shift that sense of reality, and it's wonderful. I don't know if anybody watches it on TV or you hear it and it just takes you somewhere else, and suddenly it becomes very visual. You actually can get to the point without that you're just kind of there. Then you recognize the place that you're going to, but music, drums can be very much that's the state of relaxation. But what you're doing is you're actually entering the spirit realm and connecting with that person's soul.
There's something, I think, because you've done this work for me as well, is that you say feeding back that information, it has to resonate, has to make sense. And then if I'm right in thinking, as you get, as I say, like a client, as you get that information, you're healing what's happened, but also you're making a choice moving forwards not to repeat those patterns. That's really important, isn't it? Otherwise, you can find out all this information, but you're not using that information wisely. It's about changing the pattern of behavior moving forward so that isn't being repeated.
Absolutely. So my belief is that as souls, that we do decide, to incarnate, and what have we come to experience. Now, there's very many different beliefs. So, I come from the place of my beliefs and my truth, but somebody else might believe something else. But at the end of the day, anything that has developed what we'll call blockages, for example, or patterns or illness, there has to be at some point a root cause. But my absolute belief is that as a soul, we have agreed to experience whatever we are going through. That's the hardest thing. When I first started to work in this way, it was like I would say, oh my goodness, I must have been very bad in a past life to experience this nonsense. Or what is it, isn't it we look for a path? The hardest thing is to accept that at some point in our journey, our soul journey, we have agreed to something, or we have made a choice. And I'll always use it, isn't it? If somebody's got a gun to your head or a sword in your back, and then you've either got to, fight that or leap into shark-infested waters. It's a choice. We've always got a choice. So when we take responsibility for that, but understand the choice, then we are free. We clear that energy, because it is, the universe, I believe, loves us, and the divine force, or the divine, wants us to experience what we do. So we have got guides and helpers that will help us to experience these things, and we would want to experience this. But it's all part of growth, isn't it, of understanding. So once we understand the choice and the consequences of the choice, then we're free to progress. If we choose to, while understanding what's caused our blocks or what's caused the illness or the patterns in life, if we go around the same hamster wheel, nothing's going to change. So, and that's where the inner work is very important. That's what we're doing. So as therapists, if you like, we are giving the client the understanding of kind of how this scenario has been created. We heal it and help them to heal it with the understanding. And then they're free to make the same choice. If they keep on doing it, then they're not going to progress. But it's about the language. I think it's very important. There's no judgment in any of this work, because often when we work with, illness soul illness will manifest in many different ways, as we know. But there's no judgment in the sense of another human being's journey, whether we perceive their actions as good or bad. It's their journey. It tends to take the judgment out of it. But again, it is about being able to see if we've done our work properly and given them the understanding. Usually they don't make the same choices because we're very clear. Because also when we remove that core issue, that what the original choice and what the consequences are, when we remove that energy, because everything's energy, it almost automatically raises their vibration. So they think differently, they feel differently, and they'll create a different outlook and different reality. But if you've got somebody that is very, I would say, damaged, and at that point, that's the best word to use, isn't it? Because the soul's traumatized, the soul's damaged. But if it's very intensely damaged, it's like peeling an onion. That's the way that I use it, because you cannot go from this level of trauma to suddenly being okay. That's why the work can take a period of time. But again, for each party involved, the therapist, the shaman, the healer, and the client or the patient or the person, the soul that you're working with, there's got to be a body of proof. The only way that you'll learn and evolve is by understanding that the work that we do works and that it is real, because you do start to think it's a bit kind of, I'm going to use Harry Potter, but isn't it? We do start to think, my goodness, is it there? But there's got to be an essence from all these things that are there. Okay, there's a bigger world out of there. But also for the patient, the person that's suffering this, the proof, that's what sets them free. That's what gives people the faith in the sense of it. So no, we can't explain it, we can't demonstrate it, or can we? We may not be able to demonstrate how it works, but we can demonstrate that it does work. But it's just getting people to that point. So it's not new, remembering that shamans have worked in this way for thousands and thousands of years. We're learning from them, but in the sense of it that, it does work.
And I think what's quite important as well is because of the work I've done with you, it's very easy to begin with when you hear or you find out all these stories, that you can hold on to that story, even though you might be healing from it, you hold on to that story. Whereas we have to really remember we're in this life, we're not those past stories. Learn from the information, assimilate it, let it go. Yeah. Don't hold on to, don't attach to that information story. Just take it for what it is, what you need to learn from it, release it, move forward, creating a new life, manifest that. Lots of people, and I did for a while, was stuck in the old stories, and that just holds you back. It really slows down your progress. So can you just give us, that's really lovely about the shamanic work, can you give us a little bit of a summary about soul retrieval? Because I think it's quite related to the shamanic work as well, isn't it? Is that right? Or do you see them as...
Absolutely, Alexandra, because it is, for me, it's all just part of the one thing. We do use labels, don't we, because it's our level of understanding. So soul retrieval, in shamanic work, they would use, or people would use, soul loss. Okay, that's the sense of it. So my kind of basic understanding or explanation, so how I understand it and how I would explain it. When we have a trauma that is so painful on whichever level, and we understand that, our consciousness, we understand it. It can be grief, it can be an attack, it can be loss, it can be, but in some point of it, we can't deal with it. It's too painful. So what happens is, because the soul is made up of, for me, it's like beautiful diamonds, facets of a diamond. So when we have a trauma that we are mentally, emotionally, and physically aware of, it's affecting us, it's so painful, part of our soul will decide to kind of almost run away. It's that part of us that is, it's the pained part of us that goes to the side. Now, it manifests often in people that, you know, you'll maybe, some adults won't remember their childhood, for example, or we maybe have seen something that is so traumatic that we block it out of our mind. It's very much that, it's the same thing. That lost memory, if you like, is our mind, but it's our soul that is taking that pain away. And over the lifetimes, I mean, we're very fortunate in the 20th, the 21st century, isn't it, that we've got therapy. This is where the healing parts of it is, that we can understand, we can explore, and we can heal that part of us to bring it back through therapy. In shamanic practice is that we go looking for the parts of the soul, because I energetically, when I work with somebody, I get the sense of whether their soul is complete and intact, or I've got this sense of, right, there's a big part missing, you know, because there's a gap. Bright, shiny facets of a diamond, there's this darker, empty part of it, because we're protecting itself. But those parts are aspects of who we are. So in shamanic work, we go on a journey, altered state of reality, and we go and find those parts that may present themselves as a representation of what would have been the trauma that happened in the person's life. And it may appear as a child, or it may appear as a wounded adult. It usually appears in human form in my work, or the way my mind works. And what we then do is have a communion and a conversation, you know, so we connect with that part of the soul, that aspect, and kind of make sure we heal it, we work with it, we understand what the trauma is, to be able to convince that part of the person to come back and be part of a united soul. So soul retrieval is very much going into the spirit world and finding those wounded parts and bringing them back. In therapy, we do it in different ways as well. And this is where the crossover is. It's just different language and different methods. But, you know, we are very lucky, you know, because the fact is that, you know, when you were saying about we get stuck in the story, remembering that it's all part of the soul is eternal. So we could have many lifetimes along. The only lifetimes are is when we come into the physical plane and take up a new vessel, a new body. That's where time is actually marked, whereas the soul just remembers everything. So these are lost memories, lost aspects. And if we don't bring those parts back, often a person will be searching for something. Always manifests in a way. It could be that we feel that part of us is missing, you know, so it's there, but it's something, part of us that is wounded, that needs to be healed. So different methods, but soul loss is incredibly important to address. So if you look at the percentages, this is how I kind of look at it. So if we lose between about 5 and 7% of our soul facets, just think of them as faces of the diamond, that's what we would say would be acceptable or normal, if there's a word, normal, for any person to have experienced, because nobody really goes through life or lives without having some sort of trauma. So 5 to 7% is kind of manageable, we're aware of it, because eventually if something has happened to us as a child in this lifetime, often by the time we come to being an adult, we can look back on it as an adult and understand that maybe our perception wasn't you know, the same. We see it from an adult's eyes, not a child's eyes. If it's went lifetime after lifetime, it's stuck. It needs to be brought back. We're not aware of it. When you start to get round about 25%, I mean, it's a lot, you know, a quarter of our soul is missing. If you think about it, it's floating about. I just say it's floating about in the aura, in our energy field, but it's not connected. You know, we're not, you know, really aware of that part. 25% you would start to kind of manifest, if you like, perhaps anxiety, depression, the middle range, if you like, of mental health problems, but also we would be often experiencing physical illness. Fibromyalgia, for example, would kind of come into that level because it's very much what comes into the physical and shaman or shamanic understanding. The physical body is where it manifests last. So 25%, you're sitting there. When you really start to get to 35 to 40% or more of the soul being lost, so you can now start to visualize and imagine that there's more of that person is kind of almost out of the body rather than in the body. This would be the seat of quite serious mental illness, but also what we call soul fragmentation. And this is where soul retrieval is the most important part of it. When we've got soul fragmentation, literally a soul is so traumatized. It's a bit like if you've ever seen a stone hit a windscreen, isn't it? You've got that point, then suddenly it just spreads. That is how a part of soul would be. So if we don't bring that part back, either through soul retrieval or any method of soul retrieval, 40% or more is huge. That person would be, it would be very difficult to work with them apart through a psychiatric level. But what has happened is they need to bring those parts back. So there's a lot of theories about it. The fact is, I mean, and I was once asked, is it possible that a soul becomes so fragmented that it no longer exists? I don't know anybody that would have experienced that, but logic, if you like, tells you that the more traumatized somebody becomes, yes, the fact is that the soul would just no longer exist. It would cease to have any sort of eternity.
And I know that when we've done some of this work together, there was such a similarity between some of the work that I do, my clinical work, which we call ego state work. Yeah. And just when we're journeying into a certain very safe place. So for me, it would be taking the client to a very safe house, which would represent them, and taking them and going into a very safe room within that house, and being able to bring different aspects of themselves, different parts of their ego states, that they can then form that relationship, understand what's been going on, what the trauma was, show compassion, and we look at integrating. And as I was doing this, as I was doing the work with you, I was going, gosh, it's so similar to the ego state work. We just call it different terminology.
Absolutely, and it is. So in shamanic practice, a house comes into it, but or a dwelling. So the house, it could be a cave, it could be, you know, whatever, but not a castle. It's so interesting, but the house in shamanic practice represents a soul. And very much so we enter into the person's house. We look at the different rooms, and within the different rooms there would be different aspects of that person. There could be the wounded child, there could be the traumatized teenager. And the interesting thing is we would have the dialogue with those parts of the soul, whereas obviously ego state work, I know we've spoken about it, you talk, you have that talking therapy. So it is just, is it the more modern way? Is that what we've developed? It's an understanding. I don't believe it matters whether we put a label onto it, as well as just how the narrative, if you like. And the thing is that this work, if you look, I mean, a lot of the work that I do is looked at as being very kind of, innovative, and this is all new age stuff. And you think, well, no, actually, this is very ancient stuff, because, the ancients understood the journey of the soul. I mean, you look at the old civilizations. We know the ancient Egypt, Sumeria, Babylon, the ancient Egypt was very, very much an advanced civilization, but they understood that, if we weigh the soul, so this is the balance of good deeds, the balance of bad deeds. That was the perception there. It's all part of life's experience, but before we leave to go into the afterlife and continue our journey as the Egyptians believed, then what we had to do was recognize, the good and the bad deeds. So I always call it the baggage, isn't it? So if we understand it, go, well, thanks very much, that was a lovely experience. Now I'm not taking that with me. We no longer repeat the same pattern, because that is the thing when we look at the past life scenario of this. It is past experiences, but if we have agreed, remember we're talking about choice. So the biggest part of this response is about responsibility. We are responsible for our own choices. So if we have agreed to have an experience in a past life, let's say, and can I use an example, because it's the biggest sense of it. So when we look at, for example, a vow of obedience, because it's the one that we all we go, I mean, we're now in the 21st century, who on earth is going to be? But that's quite a westernized understanding. But right up until, well, I mean, I know in the 1980s, when I get married, I took a lovely vow of obedience to love, honour and obey my husband. Now, in the sense of it, we understand, that there's a difference with this, but actually on a spiritual sense of it, that is a real vow. That is something that we intend to stand by, in the way. So a vow of obedience is very much, what would that mean? How would that manifest if we understand it? So when we vow to obey somebody, so when we go into the military still in this lifetime, we swear allegiance to our queen. Any sort of vows, but in the marriage vow, when we vow to obey somebody, we've given them our power. So if you look at historically a woman, and this is not a sex, it's an experiential thing, we vow. So, when we vowed to get married, what we were doing was we became their property historically. If we had land, if we had money, the dowry system, that became theirs. We could own nothing. And we didn't actually have our own name, so we gave away our name. Now, in the sense of it, as we understand the journey of the soul, that is not, it's not gender related. As I said, we might choose to have incarnations as male for an experience. We might choose to have incarnations as female. So most people that exist in the human state will have at some point taken a vow of obedience, whether it's there. It affects us because it manifests that vow is there until we understand it and release it. So the past, everything that goes on in the past life is affecting our current incarnation. So that vow of obedience will mean that we always feel that there is somebody that we have, any person that we perceive to be in a position of authority. Now that starts off as a parent, then it's usually a teacher, then it can be, we'll have somebody, a boss at work, and then perhaps a partner. isn't it that we start to, as soon as we're born, those aspects of our past lives start to kick in. So we're pre-programmed until we kind of go, wait a minute here, something's not going right. Because what would manifest is that when we have this perception of somebody in authority, we perhaps feel that we're threatened. In a way, we can feel that we are not in charge of our own life. We've got to follow the rules. We obey. We're not free thinking because we are programmed, from a very young age, nature or nurture in that sense of it. But as we get older, it means that we will always seek approval. Always. We might have a really horrible boss that doesn't know what they're doing, but they've got there by whatever luck or whatever, and we go, oh, okay, but they know better. They know better. They're not very good at their job, but they're better than me because they're halfway up the ladder. So everything that comes from the past, until we clear it, we will carry lifetime after lifetime. That's why the ancients understood that it was a role that and an experience that they were having. But thank you, before they passed into the spirit world, thank you ever so much. We don't want to, to repeat that. And that's where this work is understandable. The bigger picture for me is that there's nobody in charge of us. As sentient souls, we make these decisions, we make these choices, but we've often, before we've incarnated, chosen to experience the positive or the negative aspects of life. It's it's like having power, isn't it? Often people will want to have power, but the same lesson, if you like, the same experience is to be in power or be very disempowered. Still part of the same thing. So that's where the souls kind of connect, and we understand the interconnection, that we're not here, we're not alone, but that often it's the choice. And when we start to understand that as healers, that there has been a choice that this person has made at some point, all the methods and the tools that we use is to really get that person to understand where they have kind of, made a choice that perhaps has taken them and misaligned them with their true self, if you like. All of this work, for me, realigns the soul, that they're whole, they're broken, it's understanding, it's knowledge. And often all that we are doing is really giving anybody the opportunity. There's the evidence, we can help you to heal, but it is like taking the horse to water, isn't it? And part of my spiritual journey, I'm very much a rescuer. And that's lovely. I'm going to say that, understand that sarcastically, because why do we go into any sort of therapy? We want to help people. The spiritual sense of things takes us to a very different level, because I believe when we see things and have the understanding, the more that we become aware of what's going on beyond what we're seeing. So you're sitting with a client, and normally they're talking, and we work through it. In a spiritual sense, you just start to know. And it's not a power thing, because it's not meant to be power about it. But we go, well, I know how to heal this best, but especially it will normally begin very close. What spurs us into becoming healers is often our own personal experience, or that we want to help to heal other people. When we have got that inner knowledge, well, I know what's wrong with them, but they can't see it. It's the most frustrating thing in the world as healers. So it's like taking the horse to water. I've stopped it now because I have learned from it many years, but what I used to do was not only take the horse to water, it wouldn't drink. I would get into the water, oh, come on in. Not only that, I would just drink the water for the horse, much better. We all have this predisposition to do it, especially it will have to mean something. So what guides us often into understanding or seeking the understanding is either that we are awakening to who we are as a soul and the aspects as we've spoken about, or that we seek answers, especially if we have had a trauma or a situation that has been so devastating. Often it's what will be the catalyst to make us seek answers out of what we would see as the norm. So you've got those two aspects: awakening, because we are, the vibration of the planet shifting, we are awakening, or that we're seeking answers. And then we start, and that's, I suppose, the most difficult thing, is not actually to be the rescuer. All we're here to do is work at a soul level to try and educate that person that it's okay. We're realigning, that's the healing part of it, but we're giving them the choice to change.
I think quite a bit of the information you just talked about really slides beautifully into the Akashic record work, because you're talking about different contracts or vows we've made, etc. But just before we go into that, it's funny, as you were talking about last week, because that's something that I think most of us will really relate to as the rescuer, and it's something I thought I had released, and it's been coming up recently, and it was just like certain people come back into your life just to highlight that to you. And it is so liberating when you make that choice, saying, I don't need to rescue anyone anymore. Okay. And this is their journey. It's their journey that they've chosen to experience. And this fits so nicely with the Akashic records, where it's about we're all on our own individual journey. And rescuing doesn't work, because not only does it take your attention off your journey and what you're meant to be doing, it stops the other person learning what they need to learn. Okay, and it is so liberating just going, I don't need to do that anymore. I can just focus on working on myself, being the best version of myself that I can be. And for those that are ready to kind of embrace that, brilliant. And if not, that's okay. It doesn't matter either.
Absolutely, and it is liberating, because we get to that point, really, we can't do it. We can't be the, in the water drinking for the horse, and it is because we do it because we care for that person. Is understanding, isn't it, that they've got to get from A to B, in the sense, the Akashic records, we know in the modern world, isn't it? It all sounds very mystical. But the ancients understood it, especially, again, I'm going back to the ancient Egyptians, but in a sense, the ancient civilizations had their own belief to it. So the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Christianity, it's the Book of Judgment. What it really is an energetic record, because everything that we do, every thought, action, and deed, it's all energy. So the Akashic records are there. It's like an energetic recording, if you like, of an individual soul, but also collective souls. It's very much about the collective consciousness, the collective unconsciousness. As individual souls, we have Akashic records. The planet has an Akashic record. The universe has an Akashic record. So if we think about it in modern days, that, if we had a database, isn't it? We've got computers. Oh, these are the symptoms. I'm sure we've all done it. Rather than go to the GP, we'll just pop our symptoms into the database.
Google.
It's great, the University of Google, but isn't it? But, and we come up with an answer. The Akashic records are a little bit easier to kind of work with, in the sense of it, there's no interpretation. What we look at, it's a sense of being able to access an individual's Akashic records to understand who they are as a soul, what they should be doing, you know, who they are, what their talents are, if you understand somebody, what they've come to earth for, you know, to incarnate, but also what's blocking them. Now, remember that you know, we use the Akashic records as an information point, but as part of a healing modality, because, and I know that we've worked as a kind of an experimental basis, anything that we've done. So, you know, we've worked with clients, you know, together, but with, obviously for confidentiality, there would be no cross-referencing. It's like, here's this person, I don't even get a date of birth, isn't it? That it's there, you know, because I work in a very much a blind session. So I don't even know what would be presenting with a client. So it's not that we're working back the way and putting in the symptoms. We can use the Akashic records as an understanding. We gain an understanding of what is actually blocking a person. We can understand the patterns, we can understand the behaviors, we understand their energy centers, the chakra system, we understand how complete the soul is. And then so working in that sense of it, it's like entering again in an altered state of reality, but it really is a protocol that is worked. It's a very simple, that you know, some people work with it very much as information. Some people work in the, you know, with the stories. I'm a very visual story that I tap into the past lives and understand it in that way. But it does not have to be as energetic wise as that, as visual in that way. So what we're really doing is we are tapping in to entering into a person's Akashic records. Some people see it as a library. That's a very common place. I tend to see it as a tapestry with threads, and I follow the thread. But what you're doing is saying, right, okay then, what is appearing in this person's life? So I'm completely blind. I don't know what's going on in their lives. What I'm doing is I want to find out. And I know that we've done this as a bit of a, you know, for your case studies and that as well, which was so interesting, you know, in the sense, because we would work with the same client. You would be working with them in a therapeutic way, and I would be working with it in this kind of mystical, isn't it? Let's access the Akashic records, because often we cannot get to the crux of the you know, the wound. I call them soul wounds. That's it. It's a trauma. You know, what is it? Isn't it that you're going through that kind of therapy? Often we get it so hidden and so far back in that person's history. So within the Akashic record work, we go back to we access the records, who they are, what the potential is, what are the blocks, and what will come up would be things like contracts. There can be vows that we've made in the back of it, because remembering as we travel through lives, we take on characters. Some people have been knights, some people have entered into the military, some people have worked the land, have been servants, some people have been slaves, some people have went into the church. It's all aspects of who we are and experiences, and within those experiences that we can understand there's almost a predisposition and a pre-programming. So when we go back and we understand the original root cause of a pattern, for example, so somebody that perhaps has entered into the church, you start to understand that human beings, we all follow the same patterns. So if somebody has entered into the church in 1563, for example, normally they would take a vow, and there would normally be a vow of poverty. Okay? There could be a vow of silence. There could be a vow of chastity. There could be a vow of obedience. We've got 4 vows there without going into anything else. You know, those vows are pre-programming the subsequent lives. They form patterns where we can't speak our truth. We are obedient. We've no money. You know, vow of chastity often will create, you know, physical conditions, you know, with the reproductive system. That's why some people have fertility issues. You know, it's all very much there, but this all appears, you know, going into the Akashic records. So we then look, we kind of then take the aspects of, it's a protocol, we work through it, we build the stories, and then we present to the person. Again, it's got to resonate. Now, remembering you're going in blind and kind of saying there, is there. Now, when we do a crossover, so I know, because I know that you and I have worked with the Akashic records, but, you know, from your experience then, you know, I'm seeing it from one aspect. So, you know, when we did the case studies, with the permission, we've got to say, of the people we were working with, you know, you worked with them in one method and I worked with them the other. And it was so surprising, wasn't it? Without any consultation, and that was it, because it was an experiment that we did. That we got the same stories. We got the same stories without any communication or any, you know, kind of cross-reference, and it wasn't it. That was it. And then we're able to, so as a therapist, then I'll kind of throw it back to you, because you've got the two worlds there, if you like. It kind of brought a different dimension to your work, didn't it?
I think it was really helpful for those clients where I was doing a lot of work, but there was still something that felt stuck. And I think as the more work I do on myself, the more intuitive I get. It's like when you're doing an assessment, you can also pick up what the blocks are anyway. Yeah. Now, sometimes they can be cleared through the therapeutic work that I'm doing, but sometimes if they feel they're stuck and they're open to a spiritual way of looking at their issues and are open to a different approach, then using that in combination really helps just shift them. And it has been, I've never had anyone disappointed, and it was like, wow, how did she know all of this stuff? How did Liz? And I'm like, it's just Liz, you know, I've not, and they trust me. I mean, you know, intense confidentiality, I would have said anything anyway. But it's really helps them to see the bigger picture, but also heal that bit that was. So if there were certain vows, contracts, bindings, whatever, that were holding them back, it's healing that in order to shift them forwards in their journey in combat. It just works so lovely to, you know, your approach and my approach so well together.
It's a different layer, isn't it? You know, when we use it. For me, it's part of the toolbox. But, you know, it gains us this real understanding of who the person is in front of us. The choices, remember, it's about the choices that they've made, but there's no judgment or blame, because often we have the blame, the shame, you know, isn't it? Well, there must be something that I've done. When we can often understand the story, you know, as in say, you know, I always use a pirate ship, isn't it? You know, the gun to the head or jump into shark-infested waters. What's the choice there? You know, we've made a choice, isn't it? There's often very bad extremes, you know, conditions or situations that people have to make bad choices. And it carries on. It then, you know, manifests, isn't it, that we're repeating the same pattern. And often, you know, that sense of it when we go beyond it. And there has been, you know, and what, you know, the wonder of it, and it is the proof. That is the thing, we're back again to the proof that what would motivate me to do anything, I have to be able to see the results. You know, and know that the work works, isn't it? You know, if not, it's very experimental, it's very way out there. But often because we cannot explain, you know, we've had lots of conversations. Well, how do you know that? I don't know, I just know it. And I'll say it's through my psychic senses, because it is in that sense of it, but it's aspects of that. But it doesn't have to be, nobody, you know, has to feel that there is a limit or a limitation, you know, or that they have to be, you know, mystical or whatever. There are aspects of all of the spiritual work that we do. There's lots of different methods out there that people are drawn to. At the end of the day, you know, it's just what we have used in the past. Some people will be, and there's a huge movement that is becoming very, very popular now. Again, part of shamanism. And we're looking at kind of South America, and where they would use plant medicines. They would work with ayahuasca combo. They're working with plants to really create almost a hallucinogenic state. And that can be very, very healing for people. That's the old ways, but it's becoming it's like almost tourist shamanism is what I kind of call it, because there are a lot of people that are out there that don't understand actually what you're really tapping into, because with that you're tapping into the primal side of us. But it again, it's therapy. It fascinates me. It's not something that I would use.
Yeah. Me too, actually. I know friends who've used it, and my argument is actually I believe you can get to that state within yourself. You don't need to take something. When you really tune in and you connect, for me it would be with the divine, and you're in alignment with yourself and union with yourself, you can go to the places you need. I do not need a substance, but then everyone to their own, everyone has their own choice. I think with the Akashic record work as well, because you have done a lot of Akashic record healing for me. And it's like, for me, my experience is like peeling an onion. You start with, I won't even say the easy bit, because none of it's easy, but you start with the outer shell, and then I remember I peel that off, and then the next bit would suddenly present itself. Right, now I need to do this, and I just kept going, and I think I did about over 15, 20 different Akashic record clearings with you. A lot of them were then, what you can do with the Akashic records is you can look at overlays between yourself and someone else, and look at the blocks and restrictions that might have occurred and might be being replayed out between yourself and another soul. And it heals you. So it might shift them a bit, but actually it's really about shifting yourself, freeing yourself up from that, because they obviously need an awareness and to be part of that to do their own inner work. But that's been so helpful. And I think one of the key things for me doing the Akashic record work, which is kind of what's really developed my own therapy as well, is the life lessons, is that it's helped me to understand what my life lesson is, and also some of the joint lessons I have with other people, so that I can understand, or I understand their life lessons and how things are played out, and I can make different choices moving forward with that knowledge. That knowledge really, really has helped me to make new choices, to stop repeating the same old patterns over and over again.
And I think the work is important to understand, and of course with the Akashic, because it is the database. So, for example, we look at the family unit. I believe that we choose our parents. Okay, we can have a good experience, a bad experience, but why do we have that experience? Because it is an experience that we're choosing. So we have what I believe is our soul group, soul families. So, we don't meet anybody, it's not a coincidence. It's not random. We meet people, it might be for a word that spurs us on to something else. But when we look at the family nucleus to start off with, that we would have agreements with each and every one of our family members to either heal or learn something from them. It's a joint experience. We've got a contract with each of those souls that we have incarnated with. So we go into contracts. So when we can understand, for example, who our children are, if we go into being parents, who our children are at a soul level, because there's lots of different kind of origins and what their characteristics are, and what our agreement is with them is the starting point that we can fulfill that, because often we have very difficult relationships, you know, that our kids can be very testing, that they can really, you know, in the sense, we go, my goodness, you know, our partnership, we start to understand it. So when things happen, you know, and we can go into, you know, the Akashic records, and that's the importance of this work, especially perhaps if we're doing family work, you know, that is there, that it goes beyond the sense, okay, so why? What are the dynamics within the family? What are the spiritual dynamics? It's amazing how you can kind of gain that understanding, because as a parent, for example, or the child of an older parent, do you know what I mean? If we can understand why we chose our parents, what were the lessons, what were we healing, you know, in that sense of it. Now, the interesting thing that through all of my work and my exploration of it, that, for example, when we do healing on ourselves, and this is again the proof. So I went through a healing process and a clearing process. Anything that I have done, I have discovered that it will have this ongoing effect. It will go up the ancestral line, but it also affects the family dynamics around me, and it will affect and clear the descendants that come after me. So work that I would be doing, I mean, I've got my sister, for example. Now, my sister, I love her to pieces, but she's not a spiritually awakened person. She's getting there. She'd have to be going on holiday with me because it's how I talk. You know, it's just my life. But what I would be working on, and perhaps came up for me, my proof, if you like, as I was clearing it, suddenly maybe a month later, a very similar situation that I was clearing, okay, suddenly there would be maybe a situation that would come up in my sister's life that was almost a mirror of what I was doing, and that was it. And that would be my aha, and that would be, you know, whereas it would have been an issue before, it's not an issue this time. But quite fascinating. There is always a kind of a manifestation we get to understand, and that's what gives us the confidence, you know, to do this work, to bring the spiritual aspect into this work. We need to gain our confidence. When I started to do my clairvoyant work, if you like, or my psychic work, isn't it, that a lot of it is, you know, when I work, the greatest kind of proof I can get is if I have seen something coming in for somebody, for example, that somebody can come back to me, not that I demand it, but somebody comes back and goes, oh, do you remember that you told me such and such? I said, oh, because I don't remember it, and it's manifested. I would never continue with this work if I didn't know that it worked. It's like any sort of healing modality, if you like, that if it ain't working, then we're not going to do it. We're not going to explore it further.
It would be lovely, just a very brief summary of past life regression, because that's slightly different from, I think, what we've been talking about in some aspects.
It's very important work. Now, balance is two different modalities. So I would now do the Akashic record work 100 times than I would do past life regression, but it's got a place for everybody. Now, so if we're using past life regression is taking somebody into a relaxed state, and what we're doing is bypassing the conscious mind and tapping into the subconscious. We then connect at that soul level, and what we are doing is that we are taking that person through a regressive situation where we're getting them to really go beyond this lifetime. We take them back to actually birth, we take them back to the womb, and then we kind of go. So we're shifting the reality and tapping into what we believe in with past lives. And again, there's got to be body of proof there, you know, because it's in, did I imagine that? But there will always be, because remembering who we were 10 lifetimes ago, we've got to recognize ourselves. We're not completely, because we're the same soul. Past life regression, if we do this as a healing modality, is where the person will visualize or know. It's not necessarily, not everybody sees images, but they would have that sense of knowing. So it is taking them back through regression. It's not hypnosis. It's deep relaxation, tapping into the soul. So, for example, a person would come and say to me, look, this is the problem that's going on in life. I want to understand the answer. So we go back with a purpose. Some people will use past life regression as a bit of fun. Absolutely great that, oh, I was taken back to such and such a life and this is what was going on. And that's really funny because I recognise that my mother in this lifetime was in that. So we're tapping into the memories. So that's it. We're tapping into the memories. Past life regressive therapy is very good because we're looking at an aspect of why we have certain behaviours or understanding our connection with a person, you know, another living soul as to why we have these scenarios. We gain answers through regression because it will take us back to a significant lifetime. So anybody that does past life regression without stating their purpose will be taken back to all sorts of lovely lives that would have no very random information. What we do is we use it to be able to understand and give that person the understanding. So very different from the Akashic work because I'm kind of gaining the information and then passing it on, but it would have to resonate with the person. But when you're there and it's that almost past life regression, you go, aha, we have these aha moments. The difference is with past life regression, there may be one or two aspects. So we talk about the blocks and restrictions. When we do an Akashic record session, for example, there could be 10 different blocks, you know, or restrictions. With past life regression, you might tap into one, you might tap into two. So it's very much, it's a longer process, more like peeling the onion, and in that sense of it. So that's why I say I like the Akashic records first, because although it's a longer session, you're kind of getting an overall kind of clearing, but it's just as an effective way because it's giving the client that sense of knowing and getting the answers as to why they are or what's happened in life and the patterns, if you like. We're tapping into the soul memory.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. And I think what's really important just before we end is to say that doing any of this work, if you are going to see someone yourself or you're thinking of doing it, you have to operate with discernment. Please, if you're finding someone, find someone who is very, very good, who is ethical. There are, unfortunately, like with all therapies, people who perhaps aren't as experienced, or trying to put it in a nice way, but perhaps take advantage of people's situations. And I think if you're going to do this work, it's deep work, you need to know that you can trust the clinician you're working with. And also know that trust yourself, trust your own intuition. And it is impossible to do this work unless your soul agrees to it.
Absolutely. There is the biggest part, I think, or the biggest block, if you like, to any, and we'll call it the spiritual work, even holistic work, isn't it? That is that there will be people that do. Take advantage, because when somebody is in a very deep state of crisis, for example, and they're looking for answers, I mean, not everybody has integrity. So the biggest part of it is, I will always suggest is, you know, that talk to other people. You know, the bulk of my work, for example, comes through a recommendation. You know, word of mouth is a great thing, isn't it? But if not, you have to look at what the agenda is, if you like. I don't want to say there's a lot of people that are scammers, but I think that's the most common thing, isn't it? If it feels too good, or it's wait a minute, what are they actually offering here, you know, in the sense of it. So yes, you know, do your research, ask questions. You know, I'm always happy for somebody to really ask, you know, and talk to me about things, you know, and, you know, and if they don't like the answers, it's fine, you know, it's there, but it is, go with their, you know, we've got a great online presence nowadays, but I'll always say that anybody can put up a website. You know, that's the whole thing, that it should be there. If it doesn't feel right, or if somebody's promising, so even I would just say that it's important that even with, I suppose, the years of experience I've done work, I never promise anybody that they can achieve X, Y, or Z. I'll look for the answers, and that's the difference. That there will be a lot of people will tell you that they can cure you, they can heal this, they can connect with that. It isn't. Just use your own intuition. It never lies to you.
Good. And if people wanted to get in touch with you, Liz, can you just give me your website, just to say that out loud?
Okay, so my website is www.liz-king.co.uk. But if you just pop Liz, I'm going to say that, isn't it? Just Google me. But if you, you know, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's, you know, in the sense of it. But if you Google Liz King, but there's all sorts of information about the Akashic records, or even connect with me on Facebook. I'm always open to even just have a chat. If somebody wants a little bit more information, listen, I love to talk.
And also you do offer courses and workshops, so if people are interested in pursuing this for their own learning, then they can get in touch with you as well about that as well.
Absolutely. Normally it's on the website, but, you know, when we're recording this, you know, in the sense of it, the world has went a little bit mad. So this year there's nothing much, but I do a lot of teaching, and there will be courses coming up. So again, they'll be in the website, or, you know, the world of Facebook. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been so brilliant talking to you, and
a real pleasure.
Hopefully this will help lots of people. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Right, you look after yourself. Keep safe.
You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.